Okay.
Oh man, that was rough technologically.
Wait. We have to do an open.
Ah. Hi, Mike.
Still here.
Mike,
I
are you
kinda
in a different
forgot
area? The bandwidth issue could be us, but we're definitely having bandwidth issues with you this week.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I've been having trouble all weekend long, or since yesterday actually, and I haven't been able to identify the problem yet. But yeah, it's definitely on my end.
Okay, as long as we know. Obviously, we have issues on our side too. For those wondering why our microphones would go out of whack, we've got a frequency issue over here, and I'm watching the receivers trying to recalibrate and get new frequency.
It's not pretty.
Unfortunately, our microphones work in the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, at which point everyone should roll their eyes and go, "That's a terrible idea!" And you want to know the thing. It is, in fact, a terrible idea. All right, let's go ahead and get started with this thingy. I'll say Atlas 5 launch, solid motor fire. So I'll start. Mike, you do solid motor firing. What was your other story? Yeah, so we'll do solid motor firing. Yeah, big explosion-y things in the intro is good. And then you'll say I had an interview with Pomerantz.
Dude.
Diamandis?
Diamandis, yes. I don't know who was here. I'm confused by these people. All right, ready?
Sure.
All right, this is number one. I need something black. There we go. Number one. Coming up, an Atlas 5 launch of MMS satellites.
A huge rocket test fires in the desert.
And I interview Will Pomerantz.
Stay tuned. Tomorrow begins right now. That's good. Was it over the top enough?
I feel like me and you were over the top, and Carrie Ann was just like, and I interview.
And Pomerantz.
And it was sort of like explosion. I'm like, and I'm cool.
All right, community, we're good with that?
See, good take.
Okay, good take. Thanks, Mike. I assume you're going at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Show. I'll see you
GTFO.
guys.
See ya. Thanks.
And now we don't need earpieces anymore, right?
Correct.
Yay!
But asking why wireless, that's because we move too much.
Wireless.
It's wireless. We move too much. I have to do too much stuff in the show. And up until now, it had been just fine.
It had been just fine.
I do not know why it does not like this.
Did you turn your mic off?
I may have accidentally turned my mic off. I did, in fact.
I didn't turn my mic off.
All right, we have to do a quick set change.
Set change.
This time, watch your feet.
It was my knee.
This time, watch your knee.
I'm okay. I'll watch it. It doesn't have an off button?
Oh, you have to just turn it all the way, and it will. Yeah, there you go.
Didn't want to do it that asking.
Dun 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 dun
It,
dun dun.
it is.
It is.
I didn't really run that long.
It was awesome. If you
Yes, you did. But my defense, you didn't tell me ahead of time how long you wanted it.
This is very true.
we
See?
don't. That's because we don't have so.
Beauty of it.
Yeah, we target 13. Oops. We target 13 minutes for each segment.
So close.
So close. I mean, we were just over by a minute or two.
Well, we started a little late. I screwed up the beginning, so really you only went like 43 minutes.
No, I accounted for that. Here you go. Have a seat. And thank you for
Yes.
coming in while you're under the weather.
Do you
I
need
really
a
appreciate that.
potty break or anything? You doing all right?
It'll keep me from talking too long if I don't take it.
Okay.
Oh, we'll just keep going.
5 hour after dark. No problem.
You make that sound unusual.
No, so I'm trying to wean them off of space news in the live show. I said that on the.
Well, and I was wondering if I was like, oh, because I looked at the time really quickly and I was like, oh, we could just skip space news.
Yes, well, I was tempted.
Yeah, but you didn't give me any signals because I could have been like, and when we come back, comments from last week's show. But you
No.
didn't say anything, so I was like, I guess we're doing news.
Nah, I figured we should do news. We had the launch, and we had QM1, which was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Turning rocks into glass, basically. That's pretty cool. It's a thing that humans can do now.
It's true.
I still want jewelry from that
Been doing that
glass.
for a while, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, but it's different when it's rocket glass.
Technically
Tens of
speaking,
thousands of years.
Technically speaking.
Rockets turning things into glass more recent.
Right.
Chris Radcliffe says, with the new set lights, how's the temperature in there this episode? Because it is warm outside, so it's
not
warm.
bad. Yeah.
It's not
not
bad.
I almost wore the jacket. I'm glad I didn't wear the jacket.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
But,
yeah. Well, besides, you'd be all like sexy and awesome, and it's like, no, there is a lumberjack video in our future. We've been talking about this. It's
I need
going to be
a
amazing.
green screen challenge.
Yes.
But I feel like you need to lumberjack something into a space. That's a thing. Something into a spaceship. It would just make me
Makes
super
sense.
happy.
Makes sense to me.
So you've done After Dark before, so you
Been
know
a
that
little
there's
while, but-
absolutely no topic whatsoever here. Let's do this. So you
So,
Hey.
okay, let me just, can I point out really quickly that this is season 8.
yeah.
My God.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
So while you mentioned that you've been dethroned,
I've been dethroned.
by the likes of
Maston.
yes,
Maston. yeah.
right?
Well, I do have a bromance with Maston. so-
However, you're probably one of the only people that we brought on in our first season
Wait, were you seeing season 1?
that we still talk to, and B,
like
still would want to have on the show.
Cheers.
He was
I'm near positive.
season 1. I thought
If
it
it
was
wasn't
season 2.
season 1, it might have been season 2.
Someone will tell us in the chat room.
Somebody
It's the
will
beauty
tell
of
us.
this.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I know, right? So
They do all the work.
Right?
shh, don't tell them that. They're not supposed to know that.
Great, now we gotta pay researchers.
Can we get, what's his name? I keep thinking Graham Norton. Can we get Graham Norton's researchers?
They're good. They're really
They're
good.
so good.
They're so good, so good. So, what do you want to talk about?
You tell me, boss.
What didn't we cover?
I don't know. I thought we only talked for like 5 minutes. Don't ask me those questions.
No, I
fast,
only
doesn't
talked
it?
for 5
Just
minutes.
start me going. That's right. You think you got anywhere near 5 minutes? I don't think I let you in for anywhere close to that long. Once I get going,
Oh, we didn't cover the price. Do you have a target price for Launcher 1?
sub $10 million. That's what we've committed to, and we're working on how far sub.
Because Rocket Labs, and again, it's kind of hard to tell what's included and whatnot. They're targeting 4.9 million.
I've heard the same thing.
Did you want to see what the other questions were that I didn't answer?
Sure.
Kick you, yeah.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
This is like, I was bombarded.
Bada-bada-bada.
Because here I am, silly me.
That's We
I'm
usually
actually making eye
Yeah, but it
contact
wasn't
with my
open.
guest. No, it's a completely different.
okay.
Yeah, you don't
You
want to.
can, but you're not going to
You
see
can,
the
but you
same.
don't. Yeah.
It doesn't go back as far.
I looked down and I thought,
Well,
oh,
let's answer them all, everyone.
crap.
All right, let's do it.
I'll talk for no more than 20 minutes per question.
Yes.
Done. All right.
Is tomorrow an acronym?
No.
But he can't answer that. Only you can.
No, it just means tomorrow.
It just means tomorrow.
Let's see. Are there any plans to sell CubeSat slots for multi-launches, or will people be looking for a ride to?
I
For
feel
a
like we
ride,
did that
have to
one.
buy a whole rocket. We basically did that. Are there
She's
multiple?
just going in order, so she may have already covered some
yeah,
of
I
them.
kind of tried to skip around a little bit because I was
Let's
like,
do it.
multiple fairings. We did
We did
that.
that.
Hybrid engine is so great. Why is
Launcher one,
Launcher
not hybrid.
one.
Launcher one,
It's a
okay,
good question. So my quick answer to that, really quick, it should only just set your
You got
timers.
20 minutes.
Basically, there's no one-size-fits-all rocket engine. You need to specify your rocket engine for the kind of job that you want to do it on. The kind of job of flying people on a suborbital trajectory that's inexpensive and also safe is pretty different than the job of flying a satellite to orbit. It's the difference between
Right.
going Mach 3.5 and going Mach 20 plus. And the difference of having people in front and having small satellites in front.
Totally.
So we certainly looked at the hybrid thing because we've already spent a lot of time and money learning how to do hybrids better.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't optimal for the job of orbital flight. Also, because I couldn't just stop there, surely.
right?
One thing I'll say is, one of the reasons at Virgin Galactic that we name our companies things like, name our vehicles things like Spaceship 1, Spaceship 2, Launcher 1.
I actually was going to ask about that.
It
but I wasn't
implies
sure
there
how
will
to,
someday be a Spaceship 3 and Launcher 2,
For
et
sure.
cetera, et cetera. Our founder, Sir Richard, has made no secrets of the fact that he would eventually love to do things like human orbital spaceflight or particularly human supersonic or hypersonic point-to-point transportation.
Sure.
And we recognize that a lot of the ways one needs to be smart to do those we're learning from Spaceship 2, but the propulsion of Spaceship 2 probably doesn't scale up to those kinds of things. So if we're going to eventually have to get really smart in advanced propulsion anyway, let's start with baby steps. Start by building Launcher 1, which in rocket terms is simple. It's not that simple in
Right.
grand terms, but in rocket terms, it's pretty simple.
I love it.
So basically the technology in Launcher 1 can then kind of slide down the scale to maybe possibly Spaceship 3,
Yeah.
where you might be able to do bigger, better things with a liquid engine.
The way I look at it is kind of like Spaceship 2 will be the mom and Launcher 1 will be the dad, and their DNA will blend in some way, and we'll have some future vehicle, whether we call it Spaceship 3 or Launcher 2 or I don't know, some new name. But if you look at all the ways in which any company or institution would need to be smart to safely send people from Los Angeles to London in 45 minutes, you can say, okay, you're going to need to do all kinds of human factors things and crew training, but also passenger training or spaceflight participants or whatever they're called at that point. Okay, check, we're doing that with Spaceship 2. You're going to need to do reusable vehicles with rapid turnaround times. Check, we're doing that with Spaceship 2. You're going to need to do hypersonic velocities, not just supersonic velocities. Well, we're not doing that with Spaceship 2. So check, we're doing that with Launcher 1.
What's the difference between hypersonic and supersonic?
Hypersonic basically means Mach 5 plus. Supersonic means Mach 1 plus.
So we had Concorde.
We had Concorde.
And we don't have Concorde anymore.
True.
We don't have anything like Concorde anymore. Is there a market for that?
Great question. Depends what it costs, and depends how fast it is, and it depends on the entire concept of operations. So a flight from LA to London in 45 minutes isn't really that helpful if it's actually from Mojave to Lossiemouth in 45 minutes.
Sure.
All right, yep.
You know, because it still takes you 2 hours to get from LA to Mojave,
Yep.
and it also isn't that helpful if you have to spend 3 hours going through a super TSA line because you're about to get on something that's different than a normal airliner.
Right.
So somebody's got to work. It's not just a technology problem. The technology problem is really dang hard in and of itself, but
Sure.
somebody's got to work all those things out. I think if there's a reasonable price point, then yes, there is a market. There are business people who want to very quickly get from point to point. There are still physical pieces of matter that we need to transport from place to place, whether it is organs going to an organ recipient who cannot wait 24 hours.
Or our pie shirts.
Or the pie shirts, exactly.
Flippin' pie
I mean,
shirts.
think how much extra you would have paid if on Amazon it's like, do you want it in 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute?
45 minutes.
That's right. It's like,
Right.
Suborbital flight.
yeah,
There you go. There's your shirt, sir.
there you go. Exactly.
I haven't even paid
That's
for it
right.
yet.
I'm still entering in the credit card number. This is weird.
And their last mile will be done on a drone. It'll be great. It'll be great.
Exactly.
So, what do you think the market? This is going to be a very different question than what you would charge. What do you think the market would bear for such a thing?
No clue.
All right.
But I won't pretend I know. It's not an infinite sum of money. We have some interesting data from Concorde.
Yeah.
We know how much that costs. We know it stayed in business for a while, but it wasn't gangbusters successful and is no longer in business.
Right.
So there are a few data points, but even that was a different era. Video conferencing wasn't an option then,
Right.
or at least not at anywhere near the scale that it is today. So you got to think about those sort of terrestrial equivalents and distance learning equivalents, which are perfectly acceptable replacements for some things, and not for you can't send an organ via video conferencing yet. Maybe with 3D
Is there
printing
going to be a
will happen
teleporter
someday.
X
But
Prize, please?
I'm sure there will be.
Okay.
I'm sure there will be.
So, you bring up an interesting point. There's something lost in a video conference,
Yep.
right? There's
Huge amount.
this.
Yep.
There's.
Yep.
I can't tell you what it is,
Yep.
but it's there.
Yep.
No, I meant this.
And Karen, could you give us a minute here?
Yeah, no problem.
We wear matching
I'm out.
shirts for a reason.
if if someone can get the price down low enough,
Yep.
could spaceflight not completely get rid of, but could it be disruptive to the video conference industry? Because why would I do a video conference if I can just be there in 2 hours?
I think it'll have an impact. I don't know if I would say disruptive necessarily, because the price is always going to be. I mean, because a video conference is essentially free, right?
Sure.
You're paying for electricity and bandwidth, and your amortized cost of 1 hour's video conference is, you'd know this way better than I, but I presume pennies or fractions thereof.
Let's say pennies or fractions thereof.
Yeah. Even if you took it to the theoretical limit of what it could possibly be just to transport you alone, right? So if you just say, okay, let's even ignore potential energy, I just need kinetic energy. So I want to get you from London to Los Angeles at half an hour, whatever speed works out. It's Mach 20, that's 1/2 mv squared. If you just do out that energy calculation and then you transfer the units so that you could say, okay, what if I could just plug into something in the outlet on the wall and I could buy energy at kilowatt hours? Even that which is obviously like way theoretical, the most efficient thing. No one's ever going to come anywhere even close to that.
Sure.
Even if we go a billion
That's your
years in the
electric
future.
rocket engine.
That's
That
your
doesn't
electric
exist.
rocket engine that weighs nothing.
That weighs
Right.
nothing,
Is
exactly.
Where you're beaming the power and yes.
Yeah.
And interesting pieces of those are not that far off science future, but putting it all together, very far off. So even that is going to work out to, it's going to cost something like $100 one way to get you just to get you to that velocity. And then you got to slow down from that velocity, so somehow you got to get rid of that energy. So $200. So if you're saying it's $200 versus pennies, okay, at that point I think it probably is disruptive to a lot, but not all of the thing. I'm not gonna. I travel a lot for work. I FaceTime back home to my wife to check on her. I'm not going to fly home every night to give her a good night kiss and then go back to my meeting the next day.
Sure.
So it's not going to totally get rid of it, but there are a lot of things where, yeah, if it were $200, I would certainly much prefer to be there in person. If I'm trying to close a business deal, if I'm trying to find a new business partner or any other type of partner, all these kinds of things, I think it would make a big difference. But we got to go a long way till we get.
Can you change traditional air as well, or is it just because we've got some orbital mechanics to deal with here, right? So you're 30 minutes from New York to London, right?
Or whatever.
Sure, 45.
It's a hypothetical example, so pick whichever one you want.
But I mean, you could. It's 45 minutes halfway around the planet, right? Point to point.
If you're at orbital velocities.
Sure, right. Sure. So, but you could do that anywhere, right? So I could do 30 minutes from California to Florida. I could do 30 or 45, or,
Yeah.
somewhere in that general number. We're using general numbers. Will that be disruptive to the airline industry?
Sure.
Because assuming the industry can get the price down to a low enough price point, why would I spend 4 hours on a plane when I can do 45 minutes on a...
There are a lot of assumptions you got to add into, but if you say yes to all of them, then definitely. I mean, you have to get the price down low. You have to solve sonic boom issues. If you have to fly these weird routes, so you're not sonic booming half of America or any other continent, that's an issue. You have to solve it's LAX or John Wayne Airport instead of being Mojave. You have to solve all of those kinds. You have to make it safe and comfortable for people. You can't be something where I need to give you 3 days worth of training to get in the back of that vehicle, probably. Or maybe I give you 3 days of training once in your life. Maybe that could work from a business perspective.
Do I need 3 days of training to get onto Spaceship Two?
We'll give you 3 days of training.
That's not the question. Do I need 3 days of
for
training?
us to sell you a ticket, yeah.
No, all right.
Yeah. I imagine if we really needed to, we could compact it. But we're selling you an experience that hopefully will impact you for the rest of your life. We're not selling you a rush. Oh, I got to have it today. Like, let me give it to me. And I mean, obviously that's not.
I'm okay with that, by
Yes.
the way. If you need to rush me on board, I'm totally cool with that.
And
just so you know.
fair enough.
Yeah.
And given that our customers have some of them been waiting for a decade, I think they're all in it for the.
But they've had their 3 days of training probably at this point.
or parts of it.
All
But one of the things that I really like about Virgin Galactic that I think in a way it makes what we are doing different from anything that has been done before. Many parts of what we are doing have been done by other people, in many cases 4 decades ago.
Right.
We're packaging it together in a different way, but also we're doing it for a fundamentally different type of person, right? A NASA astronaut has trained for decades to become an astronaut, and then has trained for years for this specific flight. And is probably in peak physical condition, has had zero medical problems of any serious level at any point in their life, right? They're ready to go. They know what to do in every situation because that is very different from what happens when I go to the airport down the street and I just get on a flight and I want to go from here to Las Vegas, right?
Yep. Sure.
They don't assume any of that. In fact, they probably assume that I'm in horrible physical condition and that I'm falling asleep during the safety briefing and all this, and they have found a way to make that system safe. We want a way that we can make it so that anyone can fly. Like, sort of the aspirational goal is if you can ride on a roller coaster, you can fly on a spaceship.
Okay.
And I think that's not wildly unrealistic. We got a ways to go, we or anyone else, to get there, but I think it's possible to get there. So that's one big part of why some level of familiarization and preparation pre-flight is necessary. Another big part is, particularly for our earliest customers. So if you imagine a typical Virgin Galactic customer, the chances are that they have literally dreamt about this experience since they were a child. Many decades. I mean, how many times do you dream you're flying in space?
Yeah.
That literally happens to me.
Right now.
Yeah, right.
Right now.
Well, I'm babbling on. That's right. Right. Now, if you've had a chance to check something off that lifelong bucket list that you've literally dreamt of, at least I've been so fortunate I've gotten a chance to do that a couple times, and I don't really remember them all that well unless I've had a chance to do them once. Like the first time I flew a parabolic flight, I'd wanted to do that so badly for so long, and it's such a blur in my brain because it's weird and it's different and it's ah, in a good way, but I just don't remember it. We don't want that to happen to our customers. We need you in full control all the time.
Right.
Or at least we would really like you in full control all the time. But also, I want you to remember all of it. You can imagine we're going to be filming you in HD from every angle, and we're going to give you a great video product at the end of the day. But video product can never quite compare to the organic memory up here, at least not yet. So we want you to be calm is probably the wrong word because you're going to be pretty amped up about it.
Yeah.
But I want you to be amped up in a way that you're in total control of everything that's going on, and you are setting the right rate in your in the hard disk in your brain, and that can't happen in minutes. Right? It's not just a matter of okay, insert the pointy end into the female end of the seatbelt, and it's not an airport. It'll get there maybe someday because you aren't in a necessarily very active role. You are. It is more like being in the rear of an aircraft than being like a space shuttle pilot. You're not flying the dang vehicle. So that's why we call it preparation rather than training. The actual training is fairly brief. The preparation takes some time and is worth doing right.
The reason I keep harping on disruptive, can you disrupt this or this? And because you got to use the word disruptive. It's required in a Web 2.0 world.
Definitely.
But even outside of that, you look at the market for who's going to be flying on a Virgin Galactic flight, and a good chunk of that is already taken up. Like they already have tickets. Some of them are waiting, but I think the people who are really capable of paying for that ticket and want to fly probably already have a ticket. So then you look forward and you go, okay, well, what's the business case past that? And I'm sure there's a business case past that, but I guess I'm poking at what's the business case past that.
I'm not sure I agree with the going in assumption. I suspect that there are a lot more people that are willing to pay at the current price point.
It's expensive.
It's an expensive thing.
Yeah.
It is absolutely. It's far from being an impulse buy at this point for the overwhelming majority of the population, certainly myself included.
Sure.
But there are a lot of people who can afford that.
All right.
And there are a lot of people for whom this is a major life-changing financial decision who will still make it.
If we could do it, we would do it.
There are many people in our current customer core who have said, my choice is either I buy a house or I rent for the rest of my life and I go to space. And they say, so when do I buy my ticket? The answer is obvious. I want to go to space.
I would do the same thing.
There are lots of people, I think, that are in that core.
Sure.
And I think there will be many more once we're actually flying. Right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who say, I'm on board, but I don't want to give you that money now. I would like to, I have other things in my life going on. So when you're flying and I can buy a ticket and the waiting time between buying a ticket and flying is not so long, and I believe that you're safe and I understand exactly what the experience is and I know exactly when it's going to happen so I can plan the rest of my life around it and I don't have this sort of, it's going to be 3 days at some point in the future. I think there's a lot of people who sign up for that.
But unless the price point comes down, there is a point where you're just going to run out of people who are capable of. I mean, I would love to fly it, but I can't.
Yep. At some point. I suspect we are supply limited for a really, really long time at the current price point. But the plan is not necessarily to keep at the current price point. Certainly the requirement is not to keep at the price point. Now, we're a business. If people keep paying the high ticket prices, we'll probably keep charging them high ticket prices. But the goal of this business, and Richard has been very clear about this, is we are democratizing space. We are opening it up to everyone. And everyone isn't just the most wealthy people.
Right.
Like every other type of technology, it starts with the wealthy people. The wealthy people are the first ones who bought every type of gadget you can imagine. Same with this, but over time, once you've sort of paid for that initial development cost, the price comes down. That actually goes back to the original rules of the Ansari X Prize, and the reason why that prize required the vehicle, the winning vehicle, whatever it was, the same vehicle to fly twice in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Because it looked at the cost of every space flight ever, and it's realized that for every single one of them, the cost is overwhelmingly dominated by workforce, by labor. It's not fuel, it's how many people need to touch that vehicle in between flight 1 and flight 2. If you're flying the same vehicle and you're flying it twice in 6 days like Spaceship One did, or even twice in 14 days, which would still be a world record by a pretty substantial margin, and you are like Scaled Composites did, the people who touched that vehicle in between flights was like a dozen or 2 dozen. Well, 2 dozen people over 6 days just doesn't cost that much.
Sure.
Regardless of how good engineers and technicians they are, there's just only so much you're paying them. It means the cost of the N+1 flight is pretty low, which means once you've paid back that initial development cost, which is not trivial, but let's be honest, it's a small fraction of the percent of what it costs to buy WhatsApp or any of other million other things that happen in this world for way more money and happen all the time. Once we paid that back, it means we can drop the flight of that N+1 flight down a lot. It'll never be nothing. It'll never be the cost of an airplane ticket just because the energies involved are so much higher, but it'll be affordable to where certainly people like yourselves who've had a lifelong passion about this, who are enthusiastic about it, can decide, are we ready to upgrade the car this year, or can we squeeze a few more years out of this one and go to space? And I imagine at that point, we are printing the tickets selling the tickets as fast as we can print them.
So, but let's loop back around. Whether you agree or disagree with the initial assessment, the concept of what are other markets for this still holds. So let's take the I don't know what to call it, citizen astronaut. I don't have a name that I like yet. I haven't found one that's like, oh, that's the one. But the people who can cut checks right now, let's take them out of the loop. You've got Launcher One, obviously. But what else? What are some other interesting markets that maybe we as the general populace or space geeks, we're just not thinking of?
Research flights is one of them. Research flights on Spaceship Two, not just on Launcher One. And so that's one reason we discussed this very briefly in our 45-minute interview extravaganza. One of the things that I first worked on when I joined Galactic and that I'm still very passionate about is the idea of flying the same vehicle, just pull out seats in the back and put in racks and fly payloads on there.
Yeah, I love that idea.
There are people who have very different views on how big a market that is. My personal guess is that it is relatively small, but it's very deep because scientists generally don't want one data point.
Right.
They want repeated data points. They want data points in different seasons. They want data points in different regions of the world.
Is it small now because it has to be, because there is nothing else that can serve that market, and it will open up when the market is capable of being
Maybe.
served?
I mean, it's not a mass. It's the customer isn't John and Jane Q Public. The customer is a small segment of John and Jane Q Public. The people who happen to be professional or student researchers in a fairly big but limited sector of research disciplines. So it's apples to oranges kind of a comparison. Right now, I think it's artificially small because, as we discussed during the long interview, we're not flying yet, so we can't yet answer all those questions about, okay, what exactly is the vibration signature, which you as the researcher need in order to design the thing so it doesn't break.
Just so you know, the signature is 8.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. So I think it grows, but I think it's always going to be limited by, the scientists probably aren't paying for that out of pocket, so they need to be able to write the grants, and there's only so many grants available, and there's a lot of competition for those grants. And that individual scientist, every minute that he or she spends writing that grant proposal is a minute they don't spend writing the grant proposal for some other terrestrial thing, and blah, blah, blah. So I think it is, I think it's small, but I think it is very deep. And the part that excites me the most personally, others have other favorite parts, but because of my work with SEDS and my own personal background, I get excited about the point in what I think is not that distant a future where at least the senior class, maybe the freshman engineering class at every major university in the country says, come in your first semester, design an experiment, in your second semester, fly that experiment to space.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
And then the next year, iterate it and get better. And by the time you graduate 4 years later, think how much smarter and better you are, which makes me happy both as a SEDS advisor and as someone who hires young people.
Well, it has other potential reaching areas there, in that if you have a club that can fly something in space, that's kind of an inspirational thing that maybe you can light the passion of someone in school that just hasn't found that yet.
Hugely.
And you could just completely change how they view all things.
Totally. And what I have found interacting a lot with not just the space professional community, but also the space enthusiast community, is there are a lot of people who are diehard true believers in space, right? Who watch every episode of this show and have crowdfunding the show, and they've watched every TEDx talk out there, and they follow every launch, and they've got tattoos of the Yuri's Night logo and all these kinds of things.
Someone has a tattoo of the Space Vidcast logo on their leg.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a real thing.
Old logo.
Well done.
Logo. Yeah.
Well done. Well, they've got 2 legs, right? So
They do.
That's right, Zigger.
2 legs.
can catch up.
All right. Yep.
There are a lot of people who have done all that homework and yet still feel like that they cannot play a role other than observing and cheering. And if that's the role you want to take, fine, we need that role. I totally support people on that role. I don't want people to think that is the only role for them.
Right.
And it used to be the only role for them because there were so few things going on, so the only people who got to play any active role were the people who I went to MIT and I have 40 years of experience and I built this, and you needed to have built 10 things before anyone let you build anything. And everyone's left with this question, well, how do I build the first dang thing, right? Everyone requires me to have built 4 already before this does not compute. Now it's very different because now you can do a Kickstarter campaign and you can say, I'm going to fly my cocktail glass in space, or I'm going to fly my HD camera to take pictures of my school district in space, or I'm going to do, whatever else. And there's so many ideas, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the first, or it doesn't necessarily have to be the best. Just doing something will allow that person who has watched every episode of the show, who's always felt like there is no way to get in, get their feet wet. And I guarantee a lot of those people are going to figure out, like, holy cow, there's something I know how to do really well that no one else in this community knows how to do. Because aerospace people are brilliant, but we don't have a monopoly on brilliance. And we tend to attract into the profession people from a relatively non-diverse set of technical backgrounds as well as demographic backgrounds.
Right.
Deep, not wide.
We're deep, not wide. Yes, that's exactly right. And so you can come in and be like, well, I don't know anything about space, but I do know something about graphic design. And chances are we're going to go like, oh, thank God. Like, we have been looking for, I've been making an engineer do graphic design for so long, and it shows, right?
Right.
And a lot of times you'll find people say, yes, 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 yes. If you have at least something to show them, it's like, and I did the graphic design for this Kickstarter campaign, and it did this, and it got it covered. Then you can go to Space Access Conference or ISDC, or you can start to say, hey, I have a big portfolio which has a space thing in it, and you can start having these really interesting conversations.
Let's hit. I've been absorbing all of his time, and I've been ignoring the chat room. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, chat room. I'm sorry, chat room. I'm not sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
This guy just takes up so much time.
I know.
Right?
I know. It's all my fault.
That's all right. They're fighting amongst themselves.
As they do.
Yeah, it happens. Goodness gracious. I don't even know where we were anymore.
I just picked. Oh. Sorry. How rude of me.
There are many small payload private launch companies emerging, some offering cheaper flights than Virgin Galactic. What makes Launcher One different from them?
Well, I think ultimately we'll see what gets borne out by reality. There's a lot of awesome ideas out there and a lot of awesome people out them, but none of them, including ourselves at this point, are flying. So I think it'll be interesting to see which of those ideas are borne out by reality.
Totally.
One thing I'm really excited about at Virgin Galactic is who knows what the future holds, right? Even on a show called Tomorrow, we don't exactly know what tomorrow holds. But I know for sure what we're spending, and I know for sure the people that we brought on board. You don't acquire a 150,000 square foot manufacturing facility and hire 100 of the best and brightest people to fill it up unless you're really dang serious about this.
Right.
And you also bring those people together, and you have at least put the right ingredients in the pot to stir up a dish that's going to be really interesting. I have seen a lot of other interesting ideas in the space community where I don't always see all those other pieces there.
Sure.
Doesn't mean the pieces aren't going to come, or maybe the pieces are already there and they're not talking about them publicly. And I hope that all those dishes come out great. I'm a space fan first. I want there to be 100 rockets that are out there doing amazing things, because if there's 100 rockets, there'll be 1 million payloads, and that's really what I'm in the business for. I'm happy with the team I'm on because I know for sure what we've got that we showed the public, and I know for sure what we've got that we haven't yet showed the public because it's not yet time for that. So
Right.
I'm very confident we're going to get there, but I hope others will get there as well.
That's the aggravating thing in space, is that it doesn't move at the same speed as technology, right? So technology, you get a new iPhone every year,
Yep.
you get a new whatever, and there's something to show for it every single
Yep.
year. New, bigger, badder, faster, Moore's Law, all that fun
Yep.
jazz. In space, it just doesn't work that fast.
Yep.
And we want it to, though,
Yep.
because we're nerds and we want that same
Yep.
speed.
Yep.
And,
Yep, I hear you.
Yeah.
and then, because of that, we announce too early sometimes.
Yeah, and then-
that's just as bad.
And you have these other things going on, like I know for sure this is true of my company, and I'm sure it is at your day jobs and a lot of other companies. There is a lot of that going on behind the scenes, and because of ITAR, I can't tell you about it.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
cannot tell you about the massive improvements that we have made over the last 6 months or 12 months or anything. Because some of it is because I choose not to.
Sure.
A lot of it is because, oh God, I would love to show. You have no idea how many times we sit in meetings where we're saying, can we please release this video? This is such a cool video, such an inspiring video, and it will help people understand like why the wait has been what it is, and what's happening in response to current events and all these kinds of things. And it's not always up to us.
Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. Can you talk at all about Spaceship 2.1? I don't know what to call it. Like, how far along is it?
Spaceship 2 serial number 2 is
202?
Yes. Yes,
serial?
SS2
really,
hyphen
we have
02.
to call it Spaceship 2 serial number 2? Is that
Spaceship 2 serial number 2.
All right,
That's what happens when you're building a fleet of spaceships instead of a single spaceship, right? So
Well, you should give them names, cool names, right?
So
Like,
we had named the first one that was lost in the test flight accident on Halloween last year. That was Enterprise.
Yep.
We have some ideas about what tail number 2 will be called, and stay tuned. And if you
Oh,
have
come on, tease it.
No, I literally don't. We don't have the final answer. We have some ideas. We don't have. And you can hear some of them if you Google them, but we don't know yet. So stay tuned. And if you have good ideas,
I'm not getting any
I was
of
gonna say,
those
there
out
should
of
be
you.
a contest!
I can tell already that I'm not going to be able to weasel that
No.
out of you. All right, keep going.
Yes. But for right now, we just call it Spaceship 2, tail number 2. So we're building it. It looks great. It's really cool to work in a spaceship factory. You know, we have a couple different offices, and I sort of split my time between them. So I'm only up in Mojave once or twice a week, which is where that vehicle is being physically built. And if I check in twice a week, it looks different every time, which is an awesome thing to share. And one of those things that we were just talking about. I would love to share this picture of how far this has come last week, and then you're teaching people how to build it, and then that's exactly what ITAR is meant to prohibit. I'm seeing the suggestions in the chat room for Spaceship Nimoy, and I will certainly be suggesting that to my colleagues.
Oh, that's a good one.
Or Terry Pratchett, both great ideas.
Yeah.
So it is coming along well. You know, we had built a lot of that before the accident we had on 31st, and thankfully, as we are learning more about what happened on that day, and as the National Transportation Safety Board is doing their investigation and releasing details back to us, we are recognizing that we don't have to go back and undo the things that we had already done, which is nice. It's allowing us to. There could have been a future where we had to step backward, or there could have been a different future where we had to remain stationary, and thankfully we've ended up in the best of those worlds, which allowed us to keep moving ahead more or less full speed. So we are building it. It now really looks like a spaceship rather a pile of parts. It's been sort of integrated together. We have built well over 90% of the parts, and we've started integrating them together. So I think the official numbers were something like 2/3 done with putting it together, assembling it into a final vehicle, and taking it towards flight test.
What about the Spaceship 2 Tail 3?
We've started ordering the long lead parts for that and started building some of it. You know, we are in an interesting position now where we're relatively vertically integrated, and we essentially are our own manufacturing organization. We have a sister company called TSC, the Spaceship Company, super creative name, as keeping with the theme of Spaceship 1 and Spaceship 2. That is our manufacturing. That builds the White Knight 2s. That builds the Spaceship 2s. That'll build Launcher 1s, so at least big parts of them under that brand name. So it will be like the same people who are building tail number 2 will then build tail number 3. So as every person closes off their individual part or section of parts or subcomponent or whatever it is, we're starting to transition them onto building the next vehicle.
How many are you planning on building?
We'll see. It sort of depends, because we largely build them in serial rather than in parallel. There are parts we build in parallel, but largely build them in serial. And because we are our own manufacturing facility, so we don't necessarily have to order them very far in advance, we are able to be flexible to what the market needs. The initial order that we have talked about was something like 5 or 6 spaceships and 2 or 3 White Knight 2s, but that was admittedly sort of a finger in the wind of that sounds about right for what we'd use in our initial run.
See if that sticks.
Yeah, and we'll see where it goes from there. And maybe that is exactly right. It has a certain appeal to it, and it kind of makes sense with some of the plans we have in order. But it could be a lot more. It could be slower. I suspect it'll be faster or more rather than lower, but it could be right on.
Since the Spaceship Company is not part of Virgin Galactic, well, I mean, it's a wholly owned subsidiary.
It's a wholly owned sister company.
Sister, sure.
Yeah.
Could someone else buy a White Knight or a Spaceship 2?
Yes.
And so,
right now
by Virgin Galactic?
Right now we're using up all of their capacity, but that was one of the ideas. That's one of the reasons why TSC was originally set up as a separate organization rather than just being a division within Virgin Galactic. There were a couple reasons for that. One was that we wanted very deliberately to blend the DNA of Scaled Composites and a Virgin Group, and so at least initially TSC was partly owned. A significant part of it was owned by Scaled. That has subsequently, we bought out their shares many years ago, so now it's a VG owned thing after we had transferred in a lot of that knowledge and indeed some of the personnel over from Scaled. That was one part of the reason why it was set up as a separate organization, but another part was we want them to be aerospace supplier, manufacturer, and that may mean that they are building vehicles or parts or components for other companies as well. And they've done a little bit of that work already. But for the most part, and if they ever have extra bandwidth, we're taking that extra bandwidth because we want to build this thing as fast as we can.
Yeah.
So speaking of other companies, Stratolaunch, they're building what would just a giant version of essentially the same thing, right? It's a obscenely large plane carrier aircraft, and then something underneath it. I think Orbital ATK is doing something underneath it now.
I believe that is.
Is that going to compete with what you guys are doing at all?
No, I don't think so, because it is much bigger. Although it will share some of the technological benefits that we have in terms of the manufacturing techniques and air launch and things like that. If you say, if you find a new unit, which is L1s, Launcher 1s, the up mass that we can carry on that, they're doing, dozens of L1 units per flight. So they are much more like a traditional kind of medium class launch vehicle. So I think they will be competing in what used to be the Delta II kind of a space and bigger. We'll see what they end up in. And I don't think that will have a huge impact. It will have some, because there'll be secondary launch opportunities, and that will provide another option to these. But for the most part, I see what they're doing as complementary rather than competitive.
More questions from chat?
Oh, like a million.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's kind of hilarious.
You're just interesting, and I like talking to you.
I know, right?
Bring it on. I still have water left in here. So.
We can only go until you're out of water?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So there are astronauts and space tourists, but people going up on a spaceship too fit neither category. Do you think it's fair to stomp on the history of those terms by calling Carmen Skipper astronauts?
Why do they fit in either? Well, because
I totally disagree with that, with the premise of that. So NASA and the United States Air Force have a tradition of celebrating anyone that goes above 50 miles as having been to space. The international community more commonly uses 100 kilometers. That's their definition, written by the people who went. Seems reasonable. Frankly, 547 is a small enough number already. I don't know why we need to go and carve out people who have flown.
Right.
I think it's very disrespectful to the pilots of the X-15 and to some of the other pilots who have flown on a variety of vehicles. There's Joe Engle flew both the space shuttle and the X-15. He's not an astronaut twice over. Like I don't really. He doesn't think that.
Right.
I've never yet met an astronaut who thinks that. Now, I think there clearly is a difference between an astronaut who has trained for decades, who has dedicated his or her life towards the preparation of flying in space as their profession. And I don't think any of the people who are going to be flying one time on Spaceship Two would say that what they're doing is identical in that respect.
Sure.
But I think what they are experiencing in space is essentially identical. If you get on Google Earth and you look at the view from 50 miles versus 100 kilometers versus space station altitude, it's not very different. It looks basically the same. I come from an Earth and planetary sciences background. I can tell you from my science side, if you just think about it from a scientific point of view, the difference between 50 miles and 100 kilometers and 300 kilometers is almost nothing. The atmospheric density is the same, right? Almost every meaningful feature is the same. It becomes just a question of, we're humans, we like round numbers, and more time is better than less time.
Sure.
Then why not a balloon, right? Because I can get up in a balloon and I can see the curvature of the Earth with a balloon. And then we'll scream on the show when they're like, this balloon went to space and took a picture. And we're like, it didn't go to space. It didn't go to space.
Yep.
So why not a balloon then?
I could imagine some balloon that gets up to an altitude where you are above the majority of the atmosphere. There are obviously physical limits on with balloon technology specifically, because you're dealing with buoyancy. You can't get above the thing you're being buoyant in any traditional sense. And so I don't know if there's a physical way to get up above most of the atmosphere. But one thing I've noticed is even with our video from our test flights earlier in the program, as soon as we got to about 60,000 feet, everyone started saying, when they looked at the video, like, oh, you're in space. Because the sky is black, and because you can start to see the limb of the atmosphere, and because you can at least start to perceive that the Earth is a sphere. Some people have all these mixed up ideas about it, and they think that people on the station can see the full sphere of Earth, and they don't realize that you have to go most of the way to the moon to see that. Only 24 people have seen that. So they get confused about some of these things, but they see the black sky, they see the thin layer, they're like, oh, you're in space. And then they say, are you weightless? And we say, well, weightless doesn't really have anything to do with altitude. You can be weightless at 10 feet off the ground if you're falling. And like, oh, so you're weightless, you can see black, you can see curvature, you're in space. And I think that is, from a layman's perspective, that's a fairly reasonable definition. If you're looking at doing research, like a lot of our customers are, you may have a slightly different definition. But again, from that definition, the difference between 50 miles and 100 kilometers and 300 kilometers is not very much, except in the sense of duration.
Are we getting into the point where there are going to be so many people going into space soon that we're just not going to put a label on it anymore? Right? Well, I mean, we've got people going out in the ocean. That used to be a rare occurrence when you'd actually, but now, whatever.
I suppose, I mean, you never heard people on the Jetsons making a big deal about being an astronaut, right? I think that is in many ways something to aspire to. Yes, there'll be something sad about losing the specialness of the profession that we personally love and have worked in. It's kind of nice to feel like like the belle of the ball in many ways, and to have everyone aspire to this, and to see it like be the thing that's used in Super Bowl commercials as the ultimate aspirational job. I don't think that will ever fully go away because it is fundamentally awesome. Right? That's just the objective truth. It is.
Yeah.
It is cool.
I think now we know
Agreed.
what I'm trying to figure out what to do for T-shirts for tomorrow. I think fundamentally awesome
Right,
is what the T-shirt should be.
No one could refute that, right? That is essentially a mathematical proof.
Right.
So I think it will always maintain
It's
some
the
of that, but we
Pomerantz
should aspire to the day when it's not special in quite the same way. Because right now, so much of its specialness is because of its scarcity, and it's too damn scarce. And I would rather lose the scarcity. I would rather lose the specialness if that is the price for eliminating the scarcity.
Chris Radcliffe in the chat room says, quote, "You're from outer space?" Oh, no, I just work there.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That is the future that we were all sold by science fiction in many ways.
Totally.
And I get tired. This is the year where everyone likes to make as many Back to the Future 2 references as possible.
Yep.
And I get very frustrated by these complaints about where is my hoverboard and my self-tying shoes, because those movies were not promises. Right? That was not a binding contract that says thou shalt have a hoverboard by 2015.
I seem to remember flying cars. I was promised this in my childhood.
Yeah.
Flying cars, robots as servants.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I don't see them.
So you were
Although
not.
actually, I have
Yeah,
robots.
I'm
you just
sorry.
don't see
Where's
them.
the phone?
You do have a lot of robots.
Yeah, I have a lot of robots.
Yeah,
You all
okay.
cannot imagine what is happening just on the other end of these cameras. It's pretty spectacular over there. But the thing is, you weren't promised, right? You were shown that this was possible and tempted to work towards them, hopefully. And thank God a lot of people are working towards them, and that's why we do have robots and we do have all these other things.
I do have an appreciation, though, that people refer back to the Future as opposed to maybe, I don't know, say 2001: A Space Odyssey, and they're not as upset, right? They're more upset about the hoverboard and the self-tying shoes as opposed to anything.
The Pan Am flights to the moon.
Precisely.
Yep.
Precisely.
I want a Pan Am flight to the moon, by the way.
Heck yeah.
Right?
I mean, you can trace the last decade of my career, and you can tell how badly I want that. Google, Lunar X Prize, Virgin Galactic, add them together. Where are we headed? And I'm excited. How lucky am I to live in a time where it's not just me saying, I want a Pan Am flight to the moon. It's like, oh, and there are jobs I can apply for that will actually pay me to work on that kind of thing, and that aren't run by madmen, right? That have some chance, not a guarantee, but have some chance and are making honest efforts to do that. I think that's awesome.
So when does Virgin Galactic become that Pan Am? When do we replace Pan Am with the name Virgin and say, oh yeah, no, just take that Virgin flight to the moon? Because if anyone could do it in style, it's I have a policy of if they fly there, always fly Virgin America.
Here. And I had that policy before I worked for Virgin Galactic.
And I don't work for Virgin Galactic, so I mean, yeah.
First of all, I hope we do a lot better than Pan Am. We last for longer and do that. But I don't know. If you ask Twitter, it's happening already. I just follow our tweet stream, and the amount of people who are talking about their flight to the moon really baffles me. I don't understand people on Twitter sometimes. I don't think it's that far off. I mean, I think certainly in the relatively near future, and I won't put specific numbers on it because it would just be throwing something at a dartboard.
So
But in
6 months out.
in 6 months out, in the relatively near future, I want to get to the point where basically everyone, certainly in the United States, a well-to-do country like the United States, at least knows an astronaut. Like maybe they haven't gone, but it's like, oh yeah, my friend Sarah, she's an astronaut. Like right now, how many people can say they are friends with an astronaut?
Right.
Probably everyone in the show. But
Everyone
I
in this
understand
show.
your point, yeah.
Well, and I would bet everyone who watches this show can say they've met an astronaut.
Right.
How many of them can say, like, I'm friends with an astronaut? And how many of them can say, like, I was friends with them, and I didn't meet them through the context of them being an astronaut, I met them in space. Like, my high school best friend is an astronaut. That is a very different, and if you think about, like, any type of major societal change that's happened, whether it's marriage equality or whether it's immigration issues, and look at how they're all tracked by like, oh, I met a person for whom that was a relevant issue.
Right.
And now, oh, it's obvious to me. All these things that used to be these pressing philosophical questions are like, should we allow marriage equality? And then it becomes like, oh no, you're talking about my friends Dan and Tim. Like that's that's a very different. I think that all these people who ask these big questions about like, should we be spending money on space? is that a worthwhile? It becomes very different. Like, well, oh, my friends Dan and Tim went to space and they did this, and Dan started this company, and Tim got the best teacher of the year
Dan
award.
and Tim have done an amazing amount of things, by the way.
Yeah, I need to
I
meet
love
more
them.
people named Dan and Tim.
Love them.
'Cause they're
I can't wait to meet Dan.
cheers to Tim.
This has been Pomerantz's Perspective.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
That is a good future to look forward to.
Hopefully,
Right?
right.
It's always better to, you always want to dream of the better future, because the other the other type of future is not a fun one.
Heck yeah. You could probably tell I'm an optimist inherently. Hopefully that has shined through in my comments. And I will say it's worked out pretty well for me thus far. If you're not a blind optimist. Like
I
if
was
you're
just
like,
saying, that's something an optimist would say.
that's true.
Just, if I may.
All right, we have time for just a couple more. Then we got to get him on his way.
Oh my goodness. You choose,
All right.
because holy cannoli, it's redonk. It's absolutely redonk. It's good stuff though. I like it.
I'm gonna take on the controversial ones.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Have fun with that.
Actually,
yeah,
it's
get
nice
into the right
if
room.
you go into Q, it's actually sorted just by the question.
man.
So we get
All
rid
right.
of the
Now you've confused
all the
me.
other shenanigans.
I know. Somebody asked about NRE, and then I had to ask for a definition of NRE.
Non-recurring engineering.
That one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was talking about. Our startup costs, or any company's startup costs. What it costs us to build the vehicle, to design the vehicle, test the vehicle, build the first vehicle, is different from what it costs just to run today's flight.
Gotcha, yeah.
Right. So what we have spent in NRE is non-trivial. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Right. That's more than I have sitting around.
Right.
But again, that is a lot less than Instagram sold for, or a lot less than a smart thermostat sold for, or lots of other things. So I find that thinking about numbers in these large scales is confusing, certainly for me, and it seems to be for a lot of other people. It's a standard issue. Like, ask the average American how much NASA is funded by, and
Right.
they'll say that it gets 10 times that it gets, but it's also that it's getting too much. Like, because our brains are not wired to think about numbers in the billions.
Yeah, totally.
Eeyore, Dream Chaser or Launcher on Launcher One? No, that doesn't make sense. But I'll say, could Dream Chaser or something like that launch aboard Spaceship Two? Or I suppose not really, because it doesn't have the. It's just not going to have the oomph on the. It requires the extra. It requires an Atlas.
And I know that I have read in the news, like others may have as well, that the SNC, the Sierra Nevada Corporation, people have talked about Dream Chaser on Stratolaunch on that rocket, which I think is probably better sized towards that
would actually. So I'm a huge fan of Dream Chaser. I think it's an amazing little vehicle. I would love to see it actually fly someday. I hope they're able to pick up that baton and just keep running with it.
It's my general theory
Yes?
towards every space vehicle.
I realized I have a question.
Go ahead. Yes, you have a question.
How do I-
Question from the audience?
Yeah, how do I get Virgin Galactic swag?
Oh yeah.
We don't have a store online right now, but I
What
think we
the
will
what?
again someday. We had one before, and it's taken down for a little while, but I think it'll be back up fairly soon. So
That'd be cool. Because you have that really cool flight logo thing.
We got some cool
I do this
logos.
because I feel like everyone has it tattooed somewhere.
there are a number of
Well,
people
yeah,
with
there's
tattoos
here,
on the back,
and yeah.
and they're all and believe me, we think they're really cool, and they get shared among our staff and our customers all the
bet.
time.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
When I was young, Star Wars. Now increasingly Star Trek.
Ah, so you're growing up. You're graduating.
I had this one of my LA moments, right? Moving to a city that has this entertainment focus, in addition to a big aerospace.
Yeah, I know, I
focus.
can't even.
It's yeah, exactly. I had a Hollywoody kind of person make a very compelling argument to me about Star Wars as being a very dystopian view of the future, and Star Trek being a very utopian view of the future, and that's sort of it was a long, thorough argument.
No,
as
but I mean, I think you
Star
just
Wars, Star
summed
Trek.
that
No,
up
I
in
mean,
like
yeah,
one
that
sentence.
was-
That's a great.
Yeah.
And that sort of made me go back and re-examine Trek. So I won't claim to be a huge Trekkie. Like I think I've seen every episode of Next Generation. I certainly haven't seen every episode of any of the other series. I don't think I've seen any episodes of Enterprise.
You don't really need to.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it.
And I would say I've seen maybe like 2 of Deep Space Nine. So
Yeah, but that's where you get more towards like a war and
yeah.
yeah. Meh.
someday I'll get there. I'm not
Right.
opposed. Just busy.
Oh, or Stargate or Firefly.
Why does it have to be or? People
Right.
like
No, it
can't
has
we
to
have
be,
it
no, you
and?
can't have. No, it can't be. You have to choose one. You're only allowed to choose one.
There could only be one.
There can only be. Highlander taught us this.
Highlander kind of taught us that.
right?
Which part of canon? Whatever.
Right, exactly. Back to canon.
I don't know. I think we're starting to run down.
Yeah, I mean,
Anything on?
we don't get to keep Will forever.
Can I keep
wore
you
you
forever?
out. I wore you out.
You wore us out.
I'm gonna need a tattoo of that.
No, you have to get our logo, like right here.
There we go.
Right there.
Well, the new one's-
one.
That one's
I
nice.
thought legs was the way to go. Legs is the trend. Leg tattoos.
Legs. What?
Been done.
Legs been done.
Okay.
Legs been done.
All right.
I kind of want
You
to
can get half the logo on one leg and half the logo on the other leg.
put your legs together, kind of
and it'll be
thing.
the
Or I suppose you
full
could do
logo.
something like that.
Oh yeah, that's what you and I should do.
Oh my, that's lame.
This just happened right here.
Boom! Ideas, magic. Anything else about space that we should have talked about that is just awesome and epic and can get other people excited?
It's cool. You can do stuff.
all
You
good.
should do stuff. There are, if you are really motivated by watching this show every Saturday, you could like spend an hour every day after you watch a show and go out and like do something.
Just a little amateur rocketry. I mean, there's a little thing.
Or and it can also be in. It doesn't have to be in the physical matter world. It can be in the virtual world. You know, I like this website spacehacks.org because you can go to that and it lists like 100 or dozens of different ways that you can get involved. And some of them are just like go to Galaxy Zoo and help classify this data.
Yeah.
You don't need any academic training. You don't need any hardware other than a computer with an internet connection and an input device like a mouse. If you've got that, you can do something meaningful in space. And I think that fact is still very foreign to a lot of people. So hopefully all of you watching the show, I suspect all of you watching the show already knew that and have known that for some time. There are a lot of people who don't know that. So spread that word. And not just to fellow space family geeks. I think a lot about how we as a space community do not yet reflect the demographics of the planet as a whole, which to me is a missed opportunity. It means that there are a lot of smart, passionate people who we have not yet converted into the choir. So they'll convert some of them and make them understand. There's room for people like you and with your skill set, and you can start today.
Become the children of tomorrow. Creepily. One other area I think, just to tack onto that, one other area if you don't want to actually like go out and build a rocket, or you don't want to classify stuff, one thing that really helps the space community is money. And not everyone has a lot, but there are these amazing campaigns on Kickstarter that you can go out for people who are doing things, and you usually get something back, like a token.
Tell me, is there any way people could financially support this show?
Well, actually, I would even argue away from that, and I would say...
I thought I was giving you a perfect setup on that.
I know, right? No, I would say... So
Go on.
Right?
how can you help it? No, everyone who's
I'm
watching
interested
now,
in your product and I would like to subscribe to your newsletter.
No, people who are... Unsubscribe! No, people who are watching now, they're probably already patrons of the show. But what you could do, you go, okay, well, I'm already contributing to, too much. If you need to pull some of your patronage, I know everyone's like,
Carrie Ann is like,
no!
we're getting interference.
I don't know, the mic's not working. If you need to pull a couple dollars, some month so that you can help fund another space campaign, you should pull a couple dollars out of this show and go fund another space campaign and help spread that wealth all over the place. Certainly it helps us build this show and make it do better, bigger, badder things and hopefully reach more people. But we're here because we want to be and because we want to get more people inspired and reach more people. And your dollars can help do that, and maybe your dollars aren't best served here.
Because we're still putting,
maybe they are. I'm not saying don't, but
we're
I'm just
still
saying.
putting our money back into the show.
So yeah,
I mean,
that would be
That's why I like this show right here, that kind of attitude.
well,
Bravo.
yeah,
Cheers.
something. So there you go. All right, I think we're gonna get you out of here so you can go home. 'Cause you
Bravo.
still have like a 4-hour drive.
Something like that.
Well, it should be like a 45-minute flight for you, about.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Give or
right.
take.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you. For you patrons, we'll see you next week. For everyone else, we'll see you in 2 weeks.